Joining us now is a great friend of mine and truly terrific person, Pastor James Kaddis. Pastor, welcome back to the program.
Charlie, glad to be here with you, brother.
So James, you and I have been texting for quite some time, and to your great credit, you have come out with great moral and biblical and theological clarity as to how Christians should view this election. Right now, there are millions of Christians that are sitting on the sideline considering not to vote or to vote for Kamala. How should Christians view their biblical duty these next 24 hours?
Well, this is a very remarkable place that we're in right now. And I'm going to come from a perspective that a lot of people might not necessarily take, because an overwhelming majority of the church, especially in the United States of America, refrains from having a conversation regarding Bible prophecy and the things that are going to be happening in the last days. And what we're hearing a lot of in the church right now is, well, Jesus is coming back any moment. The church is going to, or the country's going to burn to the ground. It doesn't matter. So we might as well just run away and not vote, not participate, not to mention the fact that Trump is kind of an unscrupulous guy. And although he might be the lesser of two evils, he's not the person that we want to vote for. Now, I want to make myself very, very clear. I'm going to simply start by saying that I think that President Trump will go down as one of the greatest presidents we have ever had in U.S. history. I want to make myself clear in saying that, especially from the perspective of a man whose mom and dad were both born and raised in Egypt. I'm first generation born into this country, and I very clearly understand the dynamic that's going on in the Middle East, all of the things that are happening. And if you study Bible prophecy and you know what the Bible says concerning the end times, we are seeing the manifestation of so many of those things beginning to formulate right now. And Jesus told us a parable. This parable is referred to or known as oftentimes the parable of the talents. And the thing that's interesting about this parable is Jesus basically talked about three different guys. One guy who basically was given 5 talents, another who was given 2, another who was given 1. The 2 who were given 5 and the other one that was given 2, they multiplied their efforts and received or made more talents, and God praised them and said, "Well done, good and faithful servants." And yet the one decided that he was going to bury his talent. Now, what's unique about this are 2 very specific variables. Number one, he tells his master in this story, "I was fearful, basically, of you." This is, in essence, the translation. "And I know you're a man who reaps where you have not sown. And in essence, you're a hardened man. So I just basically decided that I was going to bury this." And I think if you consider the response of Jesus, it was heavier. The response that Jesus told us this master had, it was, "Hey, listen, you lazy and slothful servant, you evil and slothful servant." And the thing that's interesting about this is to consider the fact that the context that Jesus tells this parable in was one very powerful place, and that was the end of the world. He was sharing this parable in the end of the world. And what he was saying was, "I've told you, I've given you talents. And those talents, the valuable treasure that I've given you, is knowledge of what is going to happen in the last days. And I don't want you taking that knowledge and burying it in the ground by saying, 'Maranatha, I can't wait until I fly. I can't wait until I fly,' and do nothing about it." He wants us to realize that he could come at any moment. The rapture could happen at any moment, which is why we should be in school board meetings, which is why we should be voting, which is why we should certainly be voting for somebody like Trump rather than somebody like Kamala Harris, because Kamala Harris represents every evil and wicked thing that you can possibly imagine.
Yes.
And you can see manifestations of it in every corner. And it's very dark, but it's very important that we point this out. I don't know about you, Charlie, but I don't want to be the guy who's caught burying my talent going, "Well, Lord, I knew you were going to come back and I was really scared. And so I just knew that the world was going to blow up anyway." Jesus would say, "You are a wicked and you are a slothful servant, and you did not do with that knowledge. I have that knowledge. I know. I'm able to understand the geopolitics of the world, and I act on it. And that's what I'm doing." And based on that is why I make my decision.
James, if is it ever in the Bible say that you should allow evil to spread if you have an ability to stop it in the end times? Is that biblical?
No way. As a matter of fact, we are given a mandate in the Bible. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3 says that the final Antichrist cannot even reveal himself until the church is removed from the earth, which means we're given a mandate. And the reason for that in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 6 and 7 is that we are the restraining force. The church, filled with the Spirit of God, are the restrainers that keep it from coming into fruition. The Bible even goes so far as to tell us a pattern of what totalitarian rule does and what it looks like in the end times. In Revelation chapter 6, it talks about a white horse, it talks about a red horse, a dark horse or a black horse, and a pale horse. The white horse, a totalitarian ruler who comes in, who rules without a bow or an arrow. He convinces everybody about a revolution. And it's speaking, of course, of the final Antichrist, the last one. Then he brings in war. His totalitarian rule brings in war. And the result of war is economic failure or collapse. And it's funny because when he talks about the black horse, he says, do not touch the oil and the wine. That means there will be a ruling class that will remain intact when economic failure happens as a result of war. And then it brings us to the pale horse, which, by the way, when Christians are gone, because they'll be raptured at this point, the end result of totalitarianism by the Antichrist during this time is the death of a quarter of the world's population. That is literally 2.5 to 3 billion people. Imagine what that looks like when Christians aren't there. Right now, we see 100 million people dying in the last century as a result of totalitarian rule, communism, and socialism. And that's with Christians here on this earth. Imagine what happens when Christians are not. And that becomes a mandate from the Bible, based on Bible prophecy, that we are supposed to fight. Listen, I don't stand up and tell people to vote for Trump because I believe we're going to win the election. I do it because God commands me to do it. And if God shows us his grace and allows that to take place,
yes,
then we stand and we say, to God be the glory.